It was an ordinary morning in our suburban neighborhood, the kind of day I cherished after a week filled with high-stress work and the constant buzz of city life. I had been in my position as deputy commissioner for a few years, and the job, though fulfilling, was never without its challenges. Long hours, unexpected emergencies, and moments of intense decision-making were a constant in my life. But the mornings, oh, the mornings, those were my time to unwind. The world was quieter then, and I could spend precious moments with my daughter, Sarah. Sarah had always been my rock. Born with a disability that affected her mobility, she had faced many physical challenges, but never once did I see her spirit falter. She was a resilient, bright girl, full of life and laughter, despite the world sometimes treating her as if she were less than. On this particular morning, she was sitting by the window, her wheelchair positioned perfectly so she could see the birds flitting about in the garden. She had always loved nature. There was something about the simplicity of it that brought her peace. I moved around the kitchen making her favorite breakfast, pancakes with a side of fresh fruit. I would always make it for her when I could, as a small gesture of love and support for the days when she felt down. She had always been a fan of Disney shows, so we spent the early part of the morning chatting about her favorite characters. Her eyes lit up as she told me all about the latest episode of her favorite series. There was a simplicity and innocence to the way she spoke, a joy that reminded me how important it was to appreciate the small moments in life. But our quiet morning was not meant to last. A knock at the door, sharp and sudden, pierced the calm that had settled over the house. I looked up from the breakfast plate I was arranging for Sarah, a frown tugging at my lips. It wasn't typical for visitors to drop by at this time, and I had a sense of unease wash over me. I set the plate down and moved to the door, wondering who it could be. When I opened it, I immediately recognized her. Karen, a member of the Homeowners Association, HOA. She was a fixture in our neighborhood, known for her overzealous involvement in every minor detail of the community. Her expression was a mixture of anger and impatience, and before I could greet her, she wasted no time in launching into her demands. "Your yard, it's a mess," she spat, crossing her arms over her chest. "The HOA standards are clear, and you're not meeting them. The front yard is unkempt and full of weeds. This is a neighborhood, not a farm." Her tone was condescending, like she was lecturing me as if I were a child. She had always been like that, judgmental and quick to criticize others while never offering a solution. I could feel my pulse quicken, the usual calm of the morning beginning to slip away. I tried to keep my voice steady, though I could feel the frustration creeping in. "Karen, we've been dealing with some personal matters recently," I explained, doing my best to remain calm. "We haven't had the chance to get to the yard yet, but it's on our list." Her eyes narrowed, clearly unimpressed by my response. She wasn't interested in hearing about the struggles we were facing as a family. She had her mind made up. "That's not good enough," she snapped. "You know the rules, and the rules say your yard must meet certain standards. I don't care about your personal matters. The HOA expects better, and I expect you to fix this immediately." I tried to explain again, hoping to diffuse the situation before it escalated. "I understand your concerns, but we've had a lot going on. I promise we'll take care of it soon." But that didn't seem to matter to Karen. Her temper flared even more. "Don't give me excuses," she shouted. "You've had enough time, and now you'll pay the price." Without warning, she turned and marched toward our front yard, as though my approval wasn't even necessary. I stood frozen for a moment, still trying to process the sudden shift in her demeanor. My mind raced, wondering why she was being so aggressive, but I quickly followed her, not wanting things to get out of hand. Sarah, hearing the commotion, wheeled herself closer to the door, her curiosity piqued. Before I could speak, Karen whirled around. "Your daughter," she sneered, "is a burden to this whole neighborhood. Maybe you should be more concerned with her condition than worrying about how your yard looks." The words struck me like a slap across the face. It wasn't the criticism of the yard that had my blood boiling. It was the cruelty in her voice. When she spoke about Sarah, how dare she? My daughter had fought every day of her life to overcome her limitations. And yet here was this woman, a stranger, who had the audacity to judge her, to treat her like she was something less. I felt my anger surge, but before I could respond, Karen's fury turned to something else entirely. Her eyes locked onto me with a strange, venomous intensity. I saw her hand move to her bag, and in an instant, I understood the danger. My heart stopped. What had been a petty argument over a yard was now something far more sinister. And then it happened. Karen's voice grew louder, her words now laced with venom as she hurled accusations at me. "This is your final warning," she screamed. "Fix your yard or I'll take legal action. The HOA will fine you, and if you continue to defy the rules, we'll make sure you regret it." Her face was flushed with rage, her fists clenched at her sides as she stormed past me, heading straight toward our front yard. It was as if the world had shrunk to the space between us, and everything outside that moment no longer mattered. I stood still for a moment, my mind racing. How had we gone from a simple disagreement over lawn care to full-blown hostility? I had dealt with difficult people in my line of work before, but this was different. This wasn't just about rules or standards. This was personal. I had tried to remain calm, to reason with her, but nothing seemed to matter to Karen. As I took a deep breath, I began to follow her. I knew I had to remain composed for Sarah's sake. The last thing I wanted was for Sarah to see me losing control. I had to set an example. I could hear the wheels of Sarah's chair turning as she made her way toward the door. She had heard the shouting and wanted to understand what was going on. "Dad?" Sarah's soft voice called from the doorway, her eyes wide with confusion and concern. I could tell she was scared, and that only fueled my resolve to handle the situation without letting it escalate any further. "Stay inside, honey," I said calmly, though my heart was racing. "Everything is going to be okay." I turned back to face Karen, whose back was now to me as she stood at the edge of the yard, her arms crossed over her chest in defiance. Her whole body language screamed hostility, as if she was daring me to challenge her authority. The morning, once so peaceful and filled with promise, now felt heavy and suffocating. I took another step toward her, trying to make it clear that I wasn't going to let this go any further. "Karen," I said firmly, but with as much patience as I could muster, "I understand that you're upset, but this isn't the way to handle things. We're trying to work through our own challenges right now, and I assure you the yard will be dealt with soon. Please, just give us some space." But my words seemed to fall on deaf ears. Karen whipped around, her face now twisted in a mask of pure anger. "Your daughter is a burden to this neighborhood," she spat, her voice filled with a bitter venom that shocked me to the core. "I don't know why you even bother with her. Maybe if you spent more time fixing your yard instead of taking care of her, this wouldn't be such an issue." The sting of her words hit me like a slap across the face. For a moment I stood frozen, unable to process what she had just said, the audacity, the cruelty. But then I saw something even worse. Karen's hand moving towards her bag. My stomach dropped as I watched her fingers fumble for something inside. A knife. My breath caught in my throat as I realized what she was about to do. The last few seconds felt like an eternity, each moment dragging longer than the last. Without any warning, Karen pulled the knife from her bag and with a violent screech lunged toward Sarah. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. The sight of the knife, gleaming in the morning sunlight, struck fear deep into my chest. In that instant, every protective instinct I had as a father came rushing to the forefront. I had no time to think, no time to hesitate. Without a second, I sprinted toward Sarah, throwing myself in front of her. "Get back!" I yelled, as I shoved Sarah's wheelchair away from the threat, pushing her out of harm's way. My hands moved with a sense of urgency I had never felt before. Karen's wild eyes were fixed on Sarah, her rage making her oblivious to everything else around her. I had to stop her, had to prevent this from escalating any further. I grabbed her wrist with both hands, just as the knife came dangerously close to my daughter. The shock of it all surged through me like an electric current, but I didn't let go. My grip tightened as I wrestled with Karen, trying to wrest the knife from her hand. My heart pounded in my chest, and for a split second, I thought I wouldn't be able to overpower her. But then I managed to twist her arm back, forcing the blade away from Sarah's direction. In one swift motion, I slammed Karen to the ground, the knife now out of her reach. My hands shook uncontrollably as I knelt over her, my breath ragged and shallow. What had just happened? How had it come to this? As I held her down, I called out to Sarah, who was now a few feet away, wide-eyed and trembling in her chair. "It's okay, Sarah," I said, my voice softer now, trying to calm her down. "You're safe. We're okay." The situation had barely registered in my mind, the rush of adrenaline still overwhelming me. My hands were still shaking, my muscles tight with the aftershock of what had just occurred. I had just fought off an HOA member who had come to our home with the intent to harm my daughter. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had to get control of this, and I had to make sure Karen never posed a threat to us again. By the time the backup arrived, Karen was still struggling beneath me, her anger now replaced with fear. She had no idea who she had just threatened, and she was about to find out that I wasn't someone she could mess with. "I'm the deputy commissioner," I finally said, my voice steady now, though the anger simmered beneath. "And I'll make sure you face the consequences for what you've done." As I held Karen down on the ground, the weight of what had just transpired began to settle in. My breath came in shallow gasps, my heart still pounding in my chest. The knife was now out of her reach, lying a few feet away, and I could feel my hands trembling as I continued to pin her to the ground. Her fury was now replaced by panic, her chest heaving with the same frantic energy that had propelled her to attack in the first place. As I looked down at her, a sickening realization began to form in my mind. This wasn't just an isolated incident. This was something far more personal. Karen's face contorted with hatred as she glared up at me. There was no remorse in her eyes, only venom. It was as if she had been waiting for this moment, a culmination of years of festering animosity. She had come to my house, not merely to enforce some trivial HOA rule, but to inflict harm, to make me pay for something far beyond the state of my front yard. Her attack was not a random outburst of anger. It had been deliberate, premeditated. Called for backup, my voice steady despite the chaos churning inside me. "This is Deputy Commissioner," I said, trying to maintain control over the situation. "I need immediate assistance. I have a suspect here who just attempted to assault my daughter." The words felt surreal, as if they were coming from someone else. How had things escalated to this point? Within minutes, the officers arrived, their footsteps echoing in the quiet of the suburban street. They rushed toward me, taking in the scene in front of them, me on top of Karen, her hands restrained, the knife just out of reach. One of the officers, a young man I'd worked with before, looked up at me, wide-eyed. "Deputy Commissioner," he said, his voice filled with shock. I nodded, my eyes still locked on Karen. "She attacked my daughter. Take her into custody." As the officers moved in to restrain her further, Karen's defiance began to crumble. Her earlier arrogance melted away as she realized the gravity of the situation. It wasn't just about a homeowner's dispute anymore. It was about assault, and she had just attacked the wrong person. Her eyes widened in recognition when she heard me identify myself. "I didn't know," she stammered, her voice laced with fear. "I didn't know who you were." Her words were less about remorse and more about fear. In that moment, the power dynamic shifted completely. Karen, who had entered my home with the intention of causing harm, now realized she had just attacked someone who held the authority to bring her down. The reality of her mistake was dawning on her, but it wasn't because of her regret. It was because of the fear that surged through her when she realized who I was. Her tone faltered, as though she was now grasping for any excuse, any way to excuse her behavior. "I thought you were just some soft, easy target," she muttered, barely above a whisper. "I didn't know you were the deputy commissioner. I would never have... I didn't mean to..." But her words were hollow. There was no genuine apology in them, only the faintest flicker of fear. It was as though her whole world had just shifted, and she wasn't sure how to cope with it. The officers, now fully in control of the situation, moved to handcuff her and lead her away. I watched as they took her into custody, her hands now bound behind her back. Her once confident posture was now broken, and as she was led to the squad car, I could see the fear in her eyes, the fear of facing the consequences for her actions. But there was also something else in those eyes, a recognition that her privilege, her position within the community, could no longer shield her from accountability. She had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. I turned back to Sarah, who was still in the doorway, her face pale with fear. Her eyes searched mine for reassurance, for some sign that everything was going to be okay. I walked over to her, my heart aching for what she had just witnessed. "It's okay, sweetheart," I said softly, kneeling beside her. "You're safe now. She can't hurt you anymore." Sarah nodded, but I could see the tremor in her hands as she wiped away a tear. The shock of it all was evident in her expression. She had never seen anything like this before, not in her quiet, sheltered life. It broke my heart to think that this would be something she would carry with her, a memory of fear that would haunt her for who knows how long. I moved her to a safer part of the house, away from the scene of the attack. I made sure she was comfortable, though I knew there was no comfort to be found in the aftermath of what had happened. She had been the target, and while she hadn't been physically harmed, the trauma of the event would linger. As I sat with her, my mind kept replaying the moments leading up to the attack. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Karen's actions than just a simple neighborhood dispute. Why had she come to my house armed with a knife? What had driven her to such extremes? There was something deeper at play here, something that I would have to uncover in the coming days. Karen had not only endangered my daughter, but she had also violated the trust of the community. She had overstepped the boundaries of civility and decency, and now it was my duty to ensure that she faced the full consequences of her actions. No one, no matter their position or status, should be allowed to harm others without facing repercussions. I would make sure of it. In the days that followed the attack, the initial shock slowly began to fade, but the emotional and psychological wounds lingered. What had begun as a quiet morning had turned into an ordeal that neither Sarah nor I would soon forget. The fear that had gripped me during the confrontation still held a firm place in my chest, but I was determined not to let it dominate my life. For Sarah, it was even harder to process. The image of Karen, knife in hand, was something no child should ever witness, and it would take time for her to fully heal. Despite the trauma, there was a quiet resilience in both of us. I knew that healing would be a process, but we would get through it together. The media quickly picked up on the story, and it wasn't long before the neighborhood was buzzing with rumors, speculations, and heated debates. What had happened in our front yard that day was no longer just a personal matter. It had become a public spectacle. People were shocked. Karen, the seemingly respectable member of the HOA, had gone to extreme lengths to harm another family, and that was something the community could not ignore. News outlets reported on the incident, and many of the neighbors reached out to me to express their disbelief. Some were supportive, offering their apologies for not having known how deeply Karen's issues had affected us. Others were more cautious, unsure how to react to the revelation that someone so involved in the community could be capable of such violence. The legal proceedings were swift. Karen was arrested and charged with attempted assault. I knew the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about a neighborhood dispute anymore. This was a violent crime. The HOA board, which had long been aware of Karen's complaints about my property, now had to confront her actions. It turned out that Karen had been harboring personal resentment toward us for quite some time. According to some of the neighbors, she had always believed that our home, with its untidy yard and lack of proper upkeep, was an eyesore in the neighborhood. She had made numerous complaints in the past, but each time they had been dismissed. No one had taken her seriously, and now it was clear why. Karen's fixation on our property had escalated over time. What had started as minor complaints about the lawn and the state of the house had grown into something much darker. Her resentment had festered into hate, and on that fateful morning, it had manifested in violence. The realization was chilling. I couldn't understand how someone could allow their anger to fester to such an extent that it led to an attempt on another person's life. But what was even more disturbing was the fact that she had always been seen as a respectable member of the community. Her role in the HOA gave her a certain level of power, and I wondered how many others she had manipulated or intimidated over the years. As the weeks passed, Karen's arrest became a point of discussion in every corner of the neighborhood. People who had once supported her were now questioning their allegiance. I wasn't interested in retribution, but I knew that justice had to take its course. It wasn't just about protecting my family. It was about making sure that no one in our community could ever feel that they were above the law, that they could get away with threatening the safety of others simply because of their position or power. This was a matter of principle. For Sarah and me, life began to return to some semblance of normalcy, though it was clear that things would never be quite the same. I made sure we spent more time together, just the two of us, away from the noise and chaos of the aftermath. We took walks in the park, visited her favorite bookstore, and talked about everything and nothing. She was still afraid, of course, but each day seemed to get a little easier for her. I did everything I could to make her feel safe again. It wasn't easy. There were nights when she would wake up in the middle of the night, her heart racing, afraid that the nightmare would return. But with every comforting word, every embrace, I could see her slowly healing. The bond between Sarah and me grew even stronger through this experience. She had always been my reason for working so hard, my reason for pushing through the toughest days. But after what had happened, I realized just how deeply our connection ran. I had always thought of myself as the protector, the one who kept her safe from harm. But this event had turned everything upside down. It was a reminder that no matter how hard we try, we can't always shield our loved ones from the darkness that exists in the world. What I could do, however, was stand beside her, support her, and make sure that she knew how much she was loved. Karen's actions, while horrifying, also served as a reminder of the importance of standing up for what is right, even when the world around you is filled with fear and uncertainty. The attack had shaken us, but it also fueled a sense of justice that I couldn't ignore. No one should have to live in fear of being attacked for something as trivial as a disagreement over a lawn. But even more than that, no one should ever be made to feel powerless, especially when the person threatening them holds a position of authority. Though the scars of that day would remain with us for a long time, I was determined not to let them define us. We had overcome something terrible, and in doing so, we had emerged stronger, more united than ever before. The road to healing was far from over, but with each passing day, I knew that we were moving forward. Together, we would continue to rebuild, not just our home, but our sense of security, our trust in the world around us. We would rise above the darkness, and in doing so, we would reclaim our peace. If you want to hear more stories like this one, where everyday situations turn into extraordinary moments, make sure to subscribe to the HOA Stories. Join us as we dive deep into the real-life experiences of people navigating through the complexities of neighborhood life, community dynamics, and personal struggles. Don't miss out on the latest episodes. Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more gripping stories. The HOA Stories is where the unexpected happens, and the truth always comes to light.